A girl named Constance, around 20 years old, lives a difficult life. Almost everything she does ends in failure. Her focus often falters, preventing her from truly succeeding. Her parents own a fruit and vegetable stall, but when asked to help out, Constance never succeeds. Her relationship with her father is often marred by arguments. Constance is still a student. Her semester exams are coming up soon. Because her home is quite far from campus, she needs a place to live closer. Eventually, she finds an advertisement for a room for rent, owned by a man named Mr. Henri. The first meeting with Mr. Henri doesn't go smoothly. In fact, Mr. Henri forbids Constance from entering the room. However, thanks to her persistence, Mr. Henri finally relented and agreed to rent the room at an affordable price for students. Although small, the room captivated Constance, making her want to move in immediately. However, things weren't that easy. Mr. Henri set a condition, a test sheet to fill out, as many other students were also interested in renting the room. So, Mr. Henri would choose who would be allowed to stay there. A few days later, Constance received a call from Mr. Henri, announcing his selection. It was his first small victory, something he had rarely experienced. Constance was delighted to no longer have to spend energy traveling back and forth from home to Paris. Although Mr. Henri was known to be unfriendly, he patiently tried to strike up a conversation with him. One day, Constance discovered Mr. Henri's old piano. Curious, he tried to play it. Unexpectedly, Mr. Henri returned home and found Constance playing. He became furious and strictly forbade Constance from touching the piano again, even threatening to evict him or fine him if he did so. Shortly afterward, Mr. Henri offered a new deal. If Constance complied with his wishes, he would receive a discount on the rent. Mr. Henri wanted to enlist Constance's help in seducing his daughter's husband, so Mr. Henri disliked his son-in-law and hoped they would separate. Constance initially refused, but said if he were allowed to stay there for free, for 6 months, he would try. Upon hearing this, Mr. Henri refused, only giving him 3 months. However, Constance stood his ground, and finally, Mr. Henri relented and agreed to Constance's request. Living in Paris was obviously expensive. Therefore, Constance looked for work and was finally accepted at a restaurant. The next day, Mr. Henri's son, Paul, arrived with his wife, Valérie, to visit his father. Constance began his activities, seducing Paul, following Mr. Henri's request. While Constance's work seemed to be going smoothly, Paul was distracted by Constance's beauty. The days went by. Constance tried to make Mr. Henri feel comfortable. Meanwhile, the semester exams were underway, but he still couldn't focus and struggled. A few days later, Paul and his wife returned to see Mr. Henri. Constance resumed his efforts to get closer to Paul. Paul and Mr. Henri were completely at odds. Even while eating, they argued. Seeing this, Constance immediately changed the subject and discussed the difficulties he was experiencing with the exams. Meanwhile, Mr. Henri began to realize that Constance had a talent for music, particularly playing the piano. Initially forbidding him, he now begged Constance to play. His beautiful playing reminded Mr. Henri of his late wife, who also loved music. Days passed, and the graduation announcement arrived. Unfortunately, Constance was devastated to learn that he had failed, while his friends had. He felt devastated and disappointed. To distract himself from his heartache, he went to a discotheque for some entertainment. Seeing Constance's sadness, Mr. Henri and Valérie also felt sad. Constance even blamed himself and felt completely useless. Valérie tried to calm Constance and told him not to judge himself. At that moment, Mr. Henri advised him, "Not everyone is successful in every field. But don't forget, you have talent. Piano can be your path if you practice diligently." At first, Constance was hesitant, because he had attended music school and his teacher had said his playing was terrible. One day, he saw a flyer for a music audition. Although he wasn't interested, Mr. Henri encouraged him to try. With that support, Constance finally worked up the courage to try. Meanwhile, Constant and Mr. Henry's plans continued. Constant continued to approach Paul and attracted him. They eventually became close, meeting often and going out together. Constant's work proved successful. Paul began to be attracted to him. That night, in the car, they almost made love. But Constant, remembering his goal, left Paul. Mr. Henry and Constant's mission seemed to be going smoothly. However, Paul and Valérie got into a fight because Paul couldn't be contacted last night. Furthermore, Valérie found women's clothing in Paul's car. Because of the commotion, Valérie even asked for a divorce from Paul. However, Paul was happy to be with Constant. However, Constant never answered Paul's calls. However, a few days later, Valérie summoned Paul to his mother's house. There, she told him she was pregnant, and in the end, they didn't separate. Upon hearing this news, Mr. Henry seemed unhappy, and his plan was doomed. However, as time went on, Mr. Henry began to realize that what he had done to his son and son-in-law was wrong. He began to open up and accept Paul as part of his family. A few days later, Constant returned home and was picked up by his father, who apparently already knew that Constant had failed the exam. Long story short, Constant continued practicing piano with Mr. Henry's help. Finally, the day of the audition arrived. Mr. Henry encouraged Constant, telling him not to worry about the results. The important thing was that you had done your best. Constant then performed at his best, but unfortunately, he didn't qualify. A few days later, Constant returned to Mr. Henry's house. Paul was there, telling him that Mr. Henry had passed away a few days ago. Mr. Henry also left a message for Constant, praying that Constant would continue fighting until one day he truly became a successful person. Constant was truly saddened by the loss of Mr. Henry, someone he had never known before, but who had been able to lift his spirits. Constant will always remember Mr. Henry's message, and he will strive to be even better. Until the film finally ended.